This is the Phat Games Podcast, Episode 2, Part 2. In this episode, I interview Gary. We talk about his music creation process, his motivations and inspirations, and we ask him what his favorite creation is. Stay tuned for the end to hear more music from Gary on Kids of Karendow Radio. Welcome to Part 2 of Episode 2 of the Phat Games Podcast. This is the part where I believe Gary is going to interview me, or am I interviewing you? What did
I
we
think
say?
you can
I already forgot.
interview me first.
You want me to interview you first?
Yeah,
This is
you go.
awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I need to pull up my questions again because I already forgot what I'm going to ask you. All right.
that's okay. My answers are going to be very, very, very candid
I
and
like candid.
and probably unelegant, but we're just winging it here,
That's
and
awesome.
that's okay.
That is completely okay. All right, Gary. So, first of all, for those of you who actually don't know, because we didn't actually really say this on our very first podcast, Gary and I have been friends for about 30 years at this point. We're old
Oh my
men.
God, has it been that long?
It's been about that
Jesus
long.
Christ.
And Gary, I think it's safe for me to say that Gary, you're one of my closest friends. Even though we are a nation apart, you and I have done a lot together. I very much value your friendship and your company. You're an amazing human being. I
Yeah,
love working
I
on
never
games with
tire of
you.
hearing that. Thank you.
Of course not. I'm complimenting you and making you feel good about yourself. Why would you feel bad about that?
Yeah, that's what I tell myself in the mirror every morning.
Don't we all? But so for those of you who are interested in knowing more about Gary and I and like how we work together and all that stuff, we decided that for this podcast we were going to kind of give ourselves interviews. So Gary's going first. So yeah, it's gonna be casual, not quite a Joe Rogan thing, but maybe kind of. I don't know. We'll figure this out. Anyway, so G, I call Gary G. How long have you been writing music? Whether it's like for video games or whatever else.
Okay, so I'm gonna say um, the year 1996 is kind of when I started making music in terms of being able to like create like a product out of it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you kind of remember this, but it was around that time when I came across a tool. It was called the Screen Tracker, and
I
basically what
remember that.
it was I guess nowadays they would call it something kind of very similar to a step sequencer. Um, and what you do is like you'd have this kind of like a grid-like uh, kind of box that you'd go in and enter notes in. You'd also be able to like kind of pick different instruments that were based off like, I don't know, like individual wave files for a particular instrument, and you would just play it back at different notes.
So
And
is it kind of
all
like
of that
a?
would be, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is it kind of like a sort of like sort of playing music like instrument samples like they would do on I'm gonna screw this up entirely, but the Super Nintendo and how they played instrumental samples for a lot of the
It's
stuff like that.
very, very similar. Yeah. Like basically these files would just contain, I guess, information on like when to play notes as well as these little kind of samples themselves.
And you could tweak the samples too. You could like pitch shift and them
Yeah,
pitch
yeah,
shift them and stuff.
yeah. And yeah, so you could save these things. You can export them to other file formats and stuff. So that's kind of how I got started actually making uh, music.
Cool. So you
Because like
said 19.
sorry, anything prior to that, I don't know. We mentioned this in kind of prior podcasts where I make stuff directly in QBasic or whatever,
That
but
stuff
it
got
just
edited
wasn't.
out. But so our listeners don't know about that. But yeah, keep going with that.
Okay, yeah. So in prior to me being able to make music in that fashion, it was me making music programmatically inside a programming language.
So now on that point, you did a lot of music writing in both BASIC on the Commodore and also the play command that played like the PC speaker audio in QBasic.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was certainly before 96. And actually, was it 96 when you got Scream Tracker and Impulse Tracker? Wow, I thought it was earlier than that. That's
No, I think it
awesome.
was around that. It was around that time. I can't remember. I think maybe it might have been 95. Maybe I don't know.
Well, I mean,
It's that long ago, man. Like the
shit.
details starting to like mush together.
Wow, that's awesome. So now you played the piano, like you were taking piano lessons since you were a little kid.
Yeah,
Um,
classically trained through RCM. I think I started around when I was in grade 3.
wow, what's RCM?
The Royal Conservatory of Music.
Oh wow. Um, so and I know you had a lot of encouragement from your family to do that. So
I was beaten
what
to it.
okay, well hopefully it's not that intense, but maybe
It
it
was that
was.
intense.
Wow. Do you want to edit that out, Gary?
It's out there. People know.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So wow. So what inspired you for video games specifically? Because I mean that's been a big part of your life for as long as I've known
I don't
you.
know if it was more inspiration, especially at the beginning. It was more like, we were all making games and we wanted to fill the silence with something. And it just seems like music was, to me, a normal part of the game experience, right? So I wouldn't make a game without putting in a tune. I had somewhat of the skills around that time. So I just didn't.
Somewhat is a little
I really
modest.
didn't know that it was gonna kind of become what it is or what it became, especially kind of post Kids of Karendow, at least the original version of it.
So arguably somewhat is modest. I mean, so for some context for our listeners, when we released Kids of Karendow, the DOS version, back in the year 2000, um, I mean, it was well known among the QBasic game development community. It was quite popular among that community, actually. I think it's very safe to say that. Gary's music won awards. Gary's music from the original version of Kids of Karendow has all been uploaded to YouTube and other music platforms. Was it SoundCloud that has it all?
No, I don't think so.
I
I
think
haven't.
no. I think Bare Knuckle Roo or Coffee Potato or whatever uploaded to SoundCloud.
No, they may have. I don't know.
I
I don't
think they
remember
did.
seeing it on SoundCloud specifically. I know it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's definitely on YouTube. So we will actually post a link to his channel in the description on this video. And you can actually hear all the original Kids of Karendow music from the 2000 DOS version. And it did receive, we won the I want to say the 2001 QB Gaming Gold's, like, I'm gonna screw that up, award for your music,
That's
among a
okay.
few other things.
We can show our audience a picture of that because I still have that somewhere.
Oh, you have that? Okay, I'll send
I
that
think
to
I
you.
have a copy of that somewhere.
All right, we'll post that up in the
I might even print it out
overlay.
and put it on my fridge at some point.
Yeah, you should frame
Just
that shit,
kidding.
Gary.
But yeah, I did all of that in Impulse Tracker.
You did,
Yeah.
and that was fucking awesome. Gee, like you did, like I'm still amazed at what you did to this day. And I were just kids back then. I rode his ass like no tomorrow. Like I remember when we were coming up to the release date of what we want to do for Kids of Karen. What I want to do, I think I could say, for Kids of Karendow Chapter 1. I remember I was at a friend's place, Jim Bennett, if you remember him, and
Oh
I
yeah, we
called
all
you from
remember
his
Jim. Yeah.
place, asking you if you're getting the music ready in
Were
time,
you
and you said
drinking
yes.
at Jim's house during that?
No, I wasn't. I was in 12th grade. I didn't really drink when I was in high school. I mean, I did a little bit, but I know I was sober at that moment in time, if memory serves. Pretty sure I was. Maybe I was. I can't remember. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I certainly didn't view projects the same way I view projects now as an adult.
Everything's all planned out, and you got
Yeah.
some kind of Kanban board or whatever. All right, G. So as an adult who's no longer a kid, who has all the time in the world, because quite frankly, that we did when we were younger. How do you balance your paying day job with this passion?
You know what? I'm going to give you the short answer, Blair. And the short answer is I don't. You know, if we weren't doing this interview right now, I would probably still be working because there's just that much stuff to do.
So how do you
But
get it
I
done
will
then?
tell you, I will tell you, I will tell you what I do skip out on. Sometimes I will skip out on house hygiene to get time to do music.
Okay.
So I don't clean this place until the
Well,
weekend.
I mean that's okay. Weekend's fine. I mean, on a weekend. How much time do you really get a week then?
You know, I usually put in a good session, good focus session of about like 3 or 4 hours on both Saturday and Sunday.
So it's 8 hours a
So
week then?
Sunday is usually, it's always like I wake up and that's like got to be the first thing I do. Right.
So you didn't
Saturday,
okay, so
I do more kind of errandy stuff, and then I'll kind of do that more kind of later on in the very early evening. That's
okay,
usually like how my schedule lands now.
that's cool. So you get like 8 hours in like a week.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good.
It's like
I don't want to say that I'm sitting there like actually like recording the whole time, right? I do spend a lot of time just doodling on a piano or a guitar,
well, I think that's
because
kind
I'm
of
trying to
like
figure
part of the
out like, you know, like
process, right?
where I want parts to go in songs too, right?
Well, I mean, this actually leads into my next question. What is your workflow like?
Uh, in terms of like workflow, usually, a lot of the time I will either write a song in my head, if that makes sense. A lot of the time that happens during driving, or maybe the shower, but also sometimes as I'm doodling on a piano or a guitar. That's usually most of the times where I will actually come up with something. And usually, you know, like depending on what I do will kind of dictate what kind of comes out. So that's why I like to use multiple avenues to try to write, I guess.
Okay.
That make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So actually on the note, we talked about your piano, your piano lessons when you were a kid. What about guitar? Did you teach yourself that, or how did you learn guitar?
Mostly by teaching myself. The story around that is my mom had this like POS in the basement collecting dust, had no strings on it. She probably got it at Zeller's or Canadian
So for
Tire
those who
or
are
something,
listening,
right?
Zellers is like the equivalent to, oh shit, I don't know.
Target.
Yeah, Target. Yeah, let's use that example.
Yeah. It's I think that company's kind of long gone now, but yeah, essentially
And
it's like kind
Target
of
in
like,
Canada's gone too. Hey.
yeah, that's a different story. But yeah, it's they basically kind of specialize in kind of like lower end consumer goods kind of thing, especially like who would go to Zellers and buy a guitar, right? But my mom did, and yeah, it was sitting in my basement, no strings on it, collecting dust, and I decided, hey, you know what, I'll just I think that was Revenue Canada calling me, wanting to arrest me. So I just I declined the
You didn't
call.
file your taxes, Gary.
Oh no, it's a common scam that they have up
Oh,
here,
okay. Oh, shit.
where some
Yeah.
random person, probably in India somewhere, will just kind of call you and say, hey, I'm gonna come and arrest you unless you give me your credit card number, and
Right.
then we'll claim to be the IRS or something.
Or the IRS or CRA or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So where was I? Yeah, so there's this like basically this broken down guitar in my basement that was collecting dust, and that was around the time when I was listening to a lot of like kind of rock type of music. So I decided to like go and grab some strings and throw them on, clean it up. Didn't really know what to tune it to, but I got creative. I had a set of encyclopedias. So I basically went to the guitar section and told me exactly how to tune it. So I did, and then somehow I came across, a couple tabs, and I just kind of learned just like that, just by figuring it out.
Wow. I mean, that's really cool, Gary. I mean, that's actually incredibly impressive. So what tools do you use to actually create the music electronically for games or whatever?
So what I use now, I've actually just recently made a switch to Ableton Live.
Don't know what that is,
I
but
don't know
please
if
explain
anybody
that.
knows what that is, but yeah, it's what they call a digital audio workstation. So it's basically just recording software.
So do you actually record like real samples with it, or how does it work?
I mostly use MIDI with software samplers. I don't know, they call them VSTs, which is called let's call them virtual instruments. I think that's an easy concept for people to understand.
Okay.
So it's like a library collection of like a crap ton of WAV files that are pre-recorded for, let's say, like every key on the piano. They'll record it like
Oh, wow.
at different speeds and loudnesses, and it'll just kind of like bundle all that in so that anytime you
So
you
it's
play
again
on
like pre-recorded samples that you can actually, oh wow, that is okay.
yeah. So you know
That's really
how
cool.
before I was talking about Scream Tracker, where it would play one
Yeah.
sample, but they'll play it at different speeds to get different kind of notes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sophisticated nowadays, where they'll record the same key, but they'll record it at different loudnesses. They'll record every single note. They'll have different articulations, and they'll bundle all that up into a kind of like a machine for you to kind of use.
So you no longer need to use a computer to change like the pitch and the speed of a sample. You
You
actually
can
have
still
that
do
already
it, but yeah,
pre-recorded for
yeah,
you, so you can actually get a more natural sounding
yeah,
sample.
yeah,
That's awesome. I actually had no idea. Like I've
yeah.
been, I,
I think like a lot of this came out of the producers needing to quickly mock up an orchestra kind of thing, right?
right.
And you know how expensive it is to like bring people into a studio and record, especially when you talk about like a full-fledged orchestra, right?
And now in times of
Uh,
COVID,
yeah,
you can't do
it's
that at
really
all.
difficult, right? But there's lots of tools out there where all this is kind of bundled up into a library that a composer can use to just like quickly mock it up, and just kind of create, so that they only really need to bring in that band once into orchestra, do a session, and then they'll be done. So it's very, very useful for film.
Wow. I mean, that's awesome. Like I've actually learned more from like, I mean, I know we're interviewing each other, but this like I wish I asked you this a long time ago, because this is actually really interesting to hear, because I didn't know. Wow, that's cool. Which artists inspire you? Like, where do you get your inspiration from?
I think like kind of like in different stages of my life, I kind of get different inspiration from kind of different things. Like I think especially when it comes to gaming music, I definitely have been inspired by the Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana kind of era of music.
Is there a specific artist that inspires you, or is it just like individual games that?
I would say with both, but like I am a big fan of. I'm going to butcher their names. We will just say the composer of Final Fantasy, the main one, and
Like which one? Because I don't know if it's, I actually don't know if it's been the same one for all of them or not.
it has been. There's been a
Oh,
principle
it
of
has been.
composer, yeah. Well, especially in
Oh,
the earlier eras
okay, yeah.
of Final Fantasy. I think lately, they've kind of been using other ones, and they've been, I guess, using that same one just to kind of do certain tracks, but not he. I don't think he's doing like full soundtracks of any of the later ones anymore. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it was kind of around that era they used a principal composer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Karen, I was hoping to say Fantasy Star because Fantasy Star 4 had some of my favorite music from the old school 16-bit era. But Final Fantasy was actually like Final Fantasy 6/3, phenomenal music as
So
well.
I don't know how to kind of express this, but back in the day, I was a Nintendo guy. Blair was a Sega guy. Okay,
Yep.
so Fantasy Star was kind of like more of a really foreign thing to me. Um, I think the first time I kind of came across it was when I went to Blair's house and he showed it to me. I will say this, there's an element where you should be kind of decoupling the music from the sound, because the sound itself, I guess when you're kind of looking at it from the context that it's a chipset,
Yeah.
so it's got to be looked at as if it was an instrument, right? So obviously, put in the right hands, you're going to be able to make some really beautiful music, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of almost not fair to kind of compare the content of that music across these two different, I guess, mediums.
I mean oh yeah, it's absolutely fair. Yeah, I entirely agree with you there. Hopefully we have a big enough following where someone's gonna like comment on this. We'll see
Yeah,
something in the
or
comments
just
on
yeah.
YouTube.
I just actually hope that there's someone in there who will just go in there and just completely shoot us down, give us some
Yeah, that's
entertainment.
fine.
Yeah.
I would love for that. All right, Gary, your favorite piece of music you've ever created in all time, ever.
All time ever. That's a really tough one because I do have kind of personal favorites of mine. I actually really like what I think the most memorable piece for me would probably be the final credit music I did for the original Karendow.
That was good music.
Yeah.
However, if I can interject my own preference from that, it would be the last boss music you did for that.
Really? Okay.
Yep. I think that was phenomenal. Again, we'll post a link in the description to all of this so anyone who's interested can listen to it.
Yeah, we'll also maybe play some of it in Phat
Oh, we
Game
might play it as
Radio
Kids of Karendow
section.
radio eventually.
Yeah.
Probably not immediately, but eventually.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because you've done a lot. Like you've done a lot recently. Even like when you weren't making music for games, you were still making music for a while. I thought that might have been something.
I would say, kind of the period when I first moved to Edmonton until I started making music for Burgle's Bounty. I don't think I was doing a whole lot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I wasn't involved in music. I think I became a better performer of music during that time because I was playing a lot more than I did when I was kind of going through school, right? But I don't think I was writing a lot during that time. But I can say that I became a better player, even though I still don't consider myself that great of a player right here. Like, yeah, because
Well,
I would have like 6 to 8 month stints where I don't touch anything.
so and to sort of defend Gary's humility, or actually maybe go against Gary's humility here, there has been a lot of people in the New York indie gaming scene, and Gary has met a lot of them over the years, that have actually found that has found his music to be phenomenal and has actually commented to his face, both in Washington, D.C. at MegFest and at Playcrafting in New York, how much they've loved his music.
Do I not remember any of this? Did we have too much wine?
We might have, but it happened to your face.
Oh, wow.
It definitely did.
I am so sorry, guys.
It's okay. We'll be interviewing him in like a couple of weeks anyway. So Jonah actually had a lot of positive comments about it. And I think so did Sam. Anyway, so you already kind of answered this question, but I'm going to change a little bit. Modern Kids of Karendow, what we're doing right now. Favorite piece of music you've done in the last couple of years for Kids of Karendow, the new version?
For Modern Karendow, definitely Overworld.
That's a fucking piece of phenomenal music. I
Yeah,
agree.
I
Well,
definitely
but
really like that one.
Pandaka is really great too. Like Pandaka, I love that too.
No, I like that. That's another kind of personal favorite of mine
Actually,
too.
there's
But
a lot of stuff you've done that
I
are really
think I
great.
think I put in the most work, time, and energy into the overworld music.
It's a good music to you'll listen to
I
a lot and
wanted
again.
to I definitely for that one I wanted to make sure there was enough parts because that I think that was the one where I really wanted to focus on the storytelling kind of aspect of the music. So you'll notice in that one there's multiple kind of parts. All those parts represent a different kind of portion of a journey of Elmo's party.
So for those of you who are listening, that was actually the music we've played in episode 1, part 3. So go listen to it. And Gary's right. It is a phenomenal piece of music. He did just a great job on it.
I want to talk about the battle music a little bit because that is
Well,
something that I actually yeah go ahead.
okay, no, go. Let's talk about the battle music. Go for it. What do you want to say?
The battle music was actually something that I came up with mostly. It mostly existed in my head actually since our attempt to do Kids of Karendow Chapter 2 back in the year 2002.
2001,
Was it
2000.
2001? Okay,
It was 2001. Yeah,
yeah. And I remember I had a very early recorded version of that probably got lost.
I never heard
Um,
it.
well, I know because it got lost in a series of hard drive crashes that have been happening to me for most of my life.
All right. So Gary has this weird electromagnetic field around his body that causes hardware to fail. That's why
No, more
Gary's best
specifically,
friend
hard
is the
drives.
cloud.
Yeah,
Hard
hard drives. Yeah.
drives. Remember your old school ancient zip drive? I don't know if
Oh my
anyone.
God, let's not talk about that.
Okay, fine.
Oh my God, like you're just gonna trigger me. I'm actually getting angry just thinking about it right now. Like the zip drive was kind of like these discs that would hold a lot of stuff. So it actually sounds really bad right now because back in the day,
If we have
200
anyone
megs,
in their
200
20s or their
megs on a drive was a lot, right? Especially when you look at the floppies, they can only hold like less than 2 megs. Like
okay,
a
yeah.
zip
So I
drive
don't
was
think
a lot.
anyone listening to
And
us actually was alive when that technology
yeah,
was
I know.
around.
Yeah. Anyways, let's make a long story short here. Those zip drives were mechanically weak, and whatever I put on them, I probably lost.
I have memories of your zip drive.
Yes. And then I would say every 2 or 3 years after that, whatever hard drive I bought would eventually die, and I would again lose stuff.
It was a very common occurrence for you.
Yeah.
All right, G, last question, dude. What advice would you give to an inspiring musician, whether it be games or otherwise?
My advice is, I don't know, use what you got. I mean, like I remember kind of like when I was young, I had no money. In my mind, I always wanted like more stuff to go buy, right? I wanted to get a new guitar, I wanted to get a new sound card. Um, yeah, just scrounge up whatever you can that's in your house and just do whatever you can, make music. Um, Especially, if you don't have money, because if you're always going to be kind of like waiting around just to have best stuff, then that's exactly what you'll just do. You'll just end up waiting around.
Okay, so if they don't have money, how much open source stuff out there is available? Free
A
stuff.
lot. You know what? Cakewalk was something that I was using right before Ableton Live, and that is actually free now. You can just go on the internet, make an account, and then just get it. You can just download it. It's free. And I think it comes with enough stuff to just kind of get you started. They actually have free versions of Ableton Live as well that you can use. There's enough free stuff to get you started. So, if you're poor and you can't afford anything, like I don't really think you need that much hardware, if any.
Well, let's say we're talking about a 10-year-old kid here, like we used to be. When you
Oh
first
man,
started.
you know what? I think the new generation is very adept at using YouTube. I think it's a very, very good resource to get you started. You can probably learn, I don't want to say everything, but you should be able to learn all the basics off YouTube.
That's awesome. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please click like and consider subscribing so you can hear more episodes of our podcast. If you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon. Patrons get exclusive access to Kids of Karendow builds and can ask us questions directly that we'll respond to on the podcast. Now stay tuned for Ultimate Power, which is the final boss music from the year 2000 version of Kids of Karendow.